week, Surfing the MASH Tsunami brings you three major stories from the world of steatotic liver disease. This weekend, we're bringing you each of these stories separately so you can listen over a shorter, discrete period of time. Hope you enjoy them.
For the last 5 years, SLD stakeholders, whether manufacturers, trial sites, providers, payers, patients, or investors, have turned to Surfing the MASH Tsunami to keep track of drug and device development, epidemiology, public health initiatives, and practice patterns. This weekend, we are sharing the three main sections from our episode 7. Roger will provide more information after these notes from our sponsors.
Surfing the MASH Tsunami is sponsored by these healthcare-related organizations: Liver Right and the Liver Right Scanning Network. On April 15th, 2025, Liver Right will open America's first virtual specialty clinic for liver disease, offering adults in all 50 states video appointments and helping GI practices and health systems triage and treat the swelling numbers of patients seeking MASLD and MASH testing. Liver Right offers same-week video visits and accepts insurance. For more information, contact Liver Right, that's liver, and then RIGHT at www.liverright.com.
Tawazin Health, your partner in global liver health innovation. At Tawazin Health, we specialize in providing small or large-scale access to FibroScan examinations for liver health-focused early detection, clinical trials, independent research, and collaborative projects with clinicians and FibroScan providers increasingly throughout the world. As industry-leading experts, we design and deliver high-quality FibroScan services because we know that accurate, high-quality, reliable data drives better outcomes. To learn about our sister lifestyle app, mylife365.me, click the Tawazin Health link on the SurfingMASH homepage. This week, our roundtable on highlights from the global think tank on steatotic liver disease includes Roger, Jörn, Louise, and behavioral scientist and key opinion leader, Dr. Kristina Curtis from the Applied Behaviour Change Consultancy in the UK.
This week is the opening section of our roundtable on the global think tank on steatotic liver disease from Barcelona. Louise Campbell, Jörn Schattenberg, and I are joined by Dr. Kristina Curtis from the UK-based consultancy Applied Behaviour Change. After introductions, the conversation starts with Jörn, who has been a co-chair of Global Think Tank since its beginning, recalling its beginning 4 years ago and how its goals, attendees, and focus have changed over time. One thing that has not changed is the growing number of people living with MASLD and MASH. Another that has not changed is that we lack the resources, integration, and even shared knowledge necessary to bring all necessary professionals and disciplines to this battle. Kristina agrees, describing how enlightened she had become simply by attending the event. Louise shares her delight that the focus of the meeting has shifted from being medical, its first year, to now looking at behavioral issues, related therapies, and how groups can interact. Jörn had talked earlier about the importance of government and politicians in providing money and resources for this kind of fight. The rest of the conversation focuses largely on the ways that what Kristina calls hybrid therapies, incorporating digital and interpersonal management, can be deployed against SLD and related metabolic conditions, and how much more we can achieve over time. Welcome to July, audience, and we are back, and I can tell you now that we will be back for the rest of the year and at least the first part of 2025, simply based on the commitments, contracts, and things that we have right now. We'll be announcing 2 or 3 new sponsors in the upcoming couple of weeks, and we are happy to be with you. Louise, how are you doing this evening?
I'm very well, thank you very much. Nice to see everybody.
And Jörn, how are you doing?
Good. I'm based in Germany, as most listeners would know. But I wonder where Louise is at, because she's been traveling.
To be fair, I am in Somerset at the moment because I've got a big project scanning high-risk patients down here in Devon and around, and therefore, but I am back up to London tomorrow and then Scotland for a holiday, so I am doing more travelling, but currently I'm sitting in the UK.
I think Jörn might have been alluding to which continent you were on or which hemisphere you were in.
Europe, for a change.
Well, it was a dead giveaway. You were somewhere in the UK because of the Journal of Hepatology right behind you says to me that's not a fake screen. That's a real Louise background. And I am in the US, which is indescribable these days. And I'd like to introduce everybody to Kristina Curtis. Kristina, how are you today?
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm really well, thank you. And I'm talking from England. Yeah, from the UK as well.
Now, where in the UK are you today?
I'm right in the centre of England in a town called Leamington Spa. So our nearest city is Birmingham, and we're about an hour and 10 minutes on the train from London.
And we will be speaking with Kristina for this portion of the episode. We expect 1 or 2 other folks who were part of the Barcelona meeting who could not make it to this this recording session, one with tonsillitis and a couple with scheduling conflicts, who will be factoring in. So when you hear this episode, hopefully all this will be seamless and easy to follow. With that, why don't we get going? Kristina, now that you've told us a little bit about yourself in terms of where you live, can you tell us a little bit about what you do, how you came to do that? And
do you want the long story or the short story?
Do the 1 to 2 minute version, okay?
So my background is in health psychology. I'm a behavioural scientist, and essentially I have always been focusing on really preventative health, and my PhD actually focused on family weight management and how we can embed behaviour change theory and models into mobile health technology to support family weight management. And since then, really, I have kind of carried on this path of health behaviour change and been working very much with public health departments who work on the front line to help them develop more evidence-based services that are actually using the latest science in terms of what helps to support behaviour change and help them develop services. I've kind of been working across academia, industry and public health. So my aim really is to bridge this gap between research and practice. So now I'm founder of Behaviour Change Consultancy, but I'm also associate and honorary lecturer at UCL's Centre of Behaviour Change.
And then what are you doing when you're not doing that?
When I'm not doing that, I'm a mother with 2 children, 5 and 7. So I'm quite busy, and then trying to fit exercise in as much as I can as well. I particularly love Pilates.
That's amazing, Kristina, because if I wasn't recording with you guys, I'd love to do some Pilates. Now I'm here.
Jörn, do you do Pilates?
Probably not at the level Kristina does. I'm up for a run.
Kristina, do you do Reformer or do you do mat Pilates?
I do mat Pilates, but I have been told about Reformer, so I'm going to try that very soon.
I've done Reformer. Mat is hard. Reformer is really work, but I enjoy it on the rare occasions I get to do it. Okay, so, and then with that, do me a favor. One thing our audience might not know or guess about you if you didn't tell them.
I think I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit, and my first business started at the age of 8, breeding hamsters on the kitchen table and selling them to pet shop. So many people
I bet your parents love that.
Kristina, it's been a long time since anybody's made our top 10 all-time answers, but that one certainly is going to qualify. And in fact, if you could tell us anything you learned at 8 about the genetics of the hamsters in question, you might make the top 3 immediately. But, that's fascinating. 4 years ago, I think the first time, Louise, actually you and I met face-to-face, and Jörn, the first time you and I met face-to-face, was at the first Barcelona session back 4 years ago. Since then, like most good ideas, it's really flourished. I've not been back since. I know Louise has been. But Jörn, to start, why don't we just take our listeners through a brief history of where the idea came from and how it got to exactly what it is that the think tank it became this year and how that design emerged.
Yeah, great, Roger. Thanks. And I remember meeting you in Barcelona again. I think it was at the time coming out of the COVID pandemic, really trying to find out where the field needs some momentum towards drug approval, identifying patients and connecting the specialists seeing these patients. We're talking about hepatologists very concerned about MASH, HCC, terminal end-stage liver disease, and all these patients being with endocrinologists that will tell you, well, the liver is really not a problem in my patients. And I think coming from that idea, I paired up with public health expert Jeff Lazarus, who has really come from the field of HIV and HCV to put focus on, let's say, neglected populations or underserved populations and moving their needs, their medical needs, into a more visible public domain, also considering, the cost of inactivity. What does it mean to be living with MASLD and suffering from MASLD? So I think that was a great combo at a time where there was a certain momentum in the field of drug development with a foreseeable success, hopefully someday in the future. Now, since then, we've had a drug approval in the US, and that's clearly with resmetirom advanced or expedited the focus on MASLD. But in the day when we started, not too many people cared. So we wanted to bring together a group of stakeholders that would see these patients, but might not necessarily know how to diagnose the disease, focusing on NITs, non-invasive tests, which patients should be tested, how to test them, how often should we see them, ask a primary care physician whether they'd be in the position to actually provide that type of care. The obvious answer is we're overwhelmed with work. How should we prioritize? And answering that question among a group of stakeholders from different disciplines, including public health, nurses, and companies developing medical and therapeutics and diagnostic tests. I think this is where we started. In the beginning, or the first think tank we held was actually focused on a type of CME learning and learning from each other. But I think it's since then, and thinking back to the global SLD think tank, to what it evolved now, just the beginning of June, we met in Barcelona on June 5th and 6th. This was about involving politicians, involving policymakers, involving public health experts, and the stakeholders, including nurses and behavioral scientists and nutritional experts, on agreeing and moving the agenda forward jointly, because I think this is really something that's been missing in the field beyond all the specialty conferences we're seeing in the MASH field. So summarizing that again, in short, I think the Global SLD think tank initiated from an idea where we said there's a lot of people involved seeing these patients, very few care about their liver conditions. So we really have to reach out and join forces, joining our knowledge and expertise in identifying those patients, potentially offering behavioral interventions, nutritional therapies, but also pharmacological therapies. And I think that line has always been across all the programs we developed for the SLD think tank. The format has changed around a little bit. The location is still the same. We're still in Barcelona, and coming back from it recently, I have to say I feel very energized having met with politicians and experts in the room with a more think tank character, smaller group of people really being able to interact and discuss the most pressing issues.
Kristina, I noticed you nodding while Jörn was saying that. What was it that he was saying specifically that you responded to that way?
No, I think I was just nodding really around how underestimated SLD is. And that's really how I felt really enlightened just from the event itself, because, it's not in the limelight. We don't talk about it. We don't talk about SLD or MASH or MASLD. It's very much the focus on type 2 diabetes when it comes to metabolic conditions, cancers, heart disease. For me, what the think tank I think is doing really well is actually giving it now its own platform, bringing it into not just specialists and having that kind of need to all actually be working together and seeing the person as a whole rather than just a separate organ or particular issue. I think that's where the think tank is going to be absolutely essential for bringing it, as I said, to the forefront, breaking down those silos, getting different specialties working together, but also the public awareness as well. And we can talk a little bit about that later on in terms of behaviour change.
So, Louise, when we said we were going to do an episode on the think tank, your suggestion was to focus on the reactions that different, not the politicians per se, but different people in the medical community who were not, in fact, hepatologists might have and what they brought to the party. So I'm wondering what it was either about this session or about the evolution over the last 4 years that led you to think that was the place we wanted to go today.
I think the evolution's been interesting because there is way more different stakeholders at the meeting this time from when we first did it. When it was first held, it really was just another liver meeting for liver specialists following on from another liver meeting. So they all know the information and the data. Whilst this meeting did occasionally slip back into the how do we find the highest risk patients for end-stage liver disease, it is a steatotic liver think tank. And I think the one thing that really engaged me about session 5, which is where Kristina, Laura, and other people talked. These aren't people who are normally in the room. And the title of this steatotic think tank was Every Breakthrough Starts with an Unexpected Idea. We do not think out of the box as hepatology very often. We're limited by our capacity of what our small units can provide. There are not a lot of hepatologists, so we need to really think outside the box. And when we looked at AI and empowering physicians and nurses to be able to see and treat more people, we are talking about a condition that affects 1 in 3 of the global adult population. We cannot keep this within hepatology. Most people do not engage with medicine and healthcare until they've had their heart attack, until they've been told they're pre-diabetic, and then there may come a conversation at some stage about the liver, but less likely when I speak to diabetes. I think the other thing for me, the way this has moved, is if we look at GLI and the big liver foundations that go around the world, it's very much patient advocacy focused. To be able to drive steatotic liver, we need to go beyond patient advocacy. We need to go beyond hepatologists. We need to go beyond allied health. We need to get into the domains that Jeff, and I have to say a shout out to Lisa Dudek-Rice for putting this agenda together and getting everybody in there, who is a nurse by background, funny enough, getting different stakeholders now to the room. There were a lot of hepatologists, there were several cardiologists, there were several endocrinologists. So it was interesting to see everybody's take on it differently. And when you put that many people with different sparking ideas into a room, you get different conversations. And the one thing I remember Kristina saying, the biggest behavioural change was from something that's in person that is then followed up with something that may be digital. And of course, FibroScan is very in person. And I'm a psychiatrically trained nurse. I use behaviour therapy to interact with my patients and have done. But I get 5 to 15 minutes very specific to see what behaviour change I can initiate and which model is going to work with which patient. So FibroScan is a treatment, as I've said multiple times. It is a behavioural therapy. And obviously, MyLife365.me is the app that's now available in 31 countries where we attach people's FibroScans to it so they can see having had that intervention and then put it into a digital format. And yes, it's young in its brief. So that, for me, interested me that we already had a lot of the components that were being talked about in the room to be able to not only do this sort of side, but also to be able to increase and triple screening, which sparked debate. But again, that's what we want. We're not going to be able to do it from our own liver units, because I don't want my nurses, when I was a senior nurse, scanning 1,000 patients in a liver unit to get 180 that are higher risk. That's a misuse of their resources. They need to be treating cirrhosis. They need to be keeping people out of hospital, not sitting scanning in a hospital. So we do need to look at more methods. So that was the thing that excited me about A, the agenda, and B, the discussions that happened in the room around the sort of coffee table discussion and everybody chipping in. It really, really said we're coming together with great ideas about how we move steatotic liver, not end-stage liver disease, forward. Because if we find steatotic liver, hopefully we'll reduce end-stage liver disease down the line. A long way of saying it really excited me, and the positivity in the room, and everybody took something from different discussions. So hats off to everybody putting the agenda together this year, because it is progressing into that.
That is very interesting. I'm going to jump in quickly, Roger, and say, of course, Louise, as a physician, I'd say it's not a treatment, it's a diagnostic. The treatment comes in because you tell them the result. And I think Kristina can tell us from a behavioral aspect here, what does that mean for a patient? If somebody tests you and gives you the test result in a visual way, and I think that's the strength, right? It's maybe a green, yellow, red thing where you say, you really have to worry about it. I think it's the interaction. If a robot was doing that, and I think the interpretation of the result wasn't there, that therapeutic aspect, as you described it, of elastography device would be lost. But seeing the patient and interpreting the results, that's really where the therapeutic aspect comes in.
Yeah, no, I'd have to agree. I mean, it's sort of the behaviour change technique that comes to mind is feedback on behaviour, of a particular scan or what have you been doing. It's part of the kind of self-monitoring of outcome. But like you say, if you've got actually someone helping you interpret those results and someone giving you that feedback, someone that that's a credible source like Louise, then it's going to have even more power than just showing it on an app, maybe on their own looking at it. So it just kind of helps to strengthen that form of information that comes back to them, that what they're doing is working, that they're making progress. So yeah, I think it's key. And yeah, as Louise said, I think the ideal scenario is if we can have what we call hybrid interventions, digital interventions, where you've got a human in the loop, then, as long as it's a well-trained, well-skilled human, then that's kind of your ideal scenario. But obviously, depending on resources, sometimes it has to be purely a digital intervention or purely human intervention.
So that's fascinating. And one of the things I find really striking is that I've been working with some of my consulting clients, and what we've been trying to figure out kind of in classic marketing is where's the pain point in the healthcare system? And the answer is there isn't really an obvious one. As Louise pointed out, this isn't a pain point for hepatology. Hepatology should be working with patients who are into end-stage disease and problems like that. Gastroenterology, not a pain point. In the States, they do a lot of scoping, and that's what they do. Primary care, nobody has the time to incorporate any more thinking into what they're doing, and most patients don't know they have the disease. Therefore, if you don't have an obvious pain point, you have to find something stickier so that with less face-to-face real-time interaction, you can get people engaged in what they're doing. And so I'm listening to this conversation with that thought in mind. What I'm hearing is, A, the importance of hybrid methodologies, and B, going back to Louise's comment and Jörn's point, that part of that involves now looking at diagnostic tools, in fact, as part of the therapeutic process and not simply part of the diagnostic structure. That's really Interesting.
This has been recently supported in a way by the liver screen results that were in the late breaker at the EASL meeting. When they looked at it, 66% approximately of patients reduced their FibroScan between the scan in the community and when they got to hepatology. Now, all of these scans were performed by skilled nurses in liver disease. That's where we can start to prove where this interaction changes. And I've said on here before, we are going to have to serially screen in the community to watch the patients whose behavior changes, whose liver stiffness comes down, to actually get the right patients to hepatology. Because of the speed that this condition is rising, we need to really look after hepatology and look after our physicians and nurses, because they are going to be overwhelmed. So we need to be looking at redeveloping models that allow us to interact. And I think Laura said it on the session 5 that I think it was 130 patients out of 136 chose a digital format for their first appointment in nutrition, which was great. But actually also the interaction, because people were having those conversations, the minute they triaged them, they were already having an intervention. So they were already being seen before the scene in a clinical, technical way. So this ability of AI and evolution, and particularly what we do, is to already engage a patient in care before they get to hepatology or endocrinology or cardiology, is very much undervalued. And I think that was the strength of this session, is we can use AI to really evolve our practices without being scared about it's going to stop our practices or we're not going to see as many people. We're going to be able to do better if we use it better. That wasn't just coming out of that session. It was coming about the NITs using them better. It was coming out of the sessions on tripling scanning. That'll all have to happen in the community, because you triple the scanning, you get the right patient too. But you have to do it in a more serial way. You need to remove that 66% of patients who are going to change in less than a month or 6 weeks because they've changed the quality of their diet, they've changed their gut health, they've changed their liver health, because they suddenly understand more. And I think we do undervalue that, because we'll often say, oh, the scan's wrong. No, it's a scan of a dynamic liver that can change. And I think your research with gluten shows that you can change the cap very much within 4 weeks. So you can really, really alter liver health very, very quickly. So doing a scan every 3 years isn't going to help you.
On behalf of the surfers, our guests, and our sponsors, Liver Right and Tawas in Health, thanks for joining us this week.
Please join us again next week when we continue our roundtables on the Steatotic Liver Disease Think Tank and advances in drug development, and are joined by an outstanding SLD newsmaker.
And until next week, stay safe, surf on, and we'll see you on podcast. Bye-bye now.